Hi and welcome, it's Christine Envall, educator, creator and world champion athlete. Today I've got my little talk on gut health and indigestion, I should say, and digestive health, obviously one of those main things being indigestion. So just while people join and before I get started, just wanted to let you know a little bit about me. So I've been in the fitness industry for around about 30 years. Starting out just with an interest in nutrition, which turned into a career as a competitive bodybuilder and then professional bodybuilder, and also teamed up with a degree in food science and nutrition and working in mainstream food industry as well as the sports nutrition industry. So as you can see behind me here, I'm in the warehouse for International Protein, and as far as being a creator, those are my creations. So I'm going to get started. So gut health is something that we are becoming more and more aware of, but what the gut actually is, it's everything from our mouth right through to the other side. So it's obviously our mouth, throat, the esophagus going into the stomach, the intestine, the bowel, and on the way out. So it is. It used to be considered a very, very simple organ in that things went in and they came straight through because it's a straight through pass. However, in recent times, people become more and more aware of how complex it actually is and how the health of the gut has a lot far-reaching impact on our overall health, in particular our immune system and our autoimmune system. It also has a big impact on our heart health, our mental health, our mood, our skin. There's a whole bunch of things here and I better make sure I don't miss any of them. Obviously, cancer, our healthy weight, and our ability obviously to absorb nutrients. So they used to say, I think, like an army marches on its stomach, or the way to a man's heart's through his stomach, but the way to good health is actually through your stomach. And we talk about the gut flora and the gut microbiome, and that's quite specifically what I'm talking about with the gut health now. And what that is there's I think 100 trillion, just let that sink in for a minute, different types of bacteria and yeasts living inside of our intestines. There's about 500 different species, and it's obviously different for everybody what it actually is, but your correct balance essentially is what keeps you in that good health. If things go out of balance, then that's when the body can start to attack itself. So obviously one of the functions with the gut and the immune system is that it fights off the bad bacteria, fights off invaders, but also knows not to attack our own healthy tissue. So when something goes wrong, and you hear that word autoimmune disease, that is essentially our body attacking itself. So our own immune system isn't recognizing that that's part of us. So that's one of the really important things that can go wrong when gut health goes out of balance. That maintenance of good, the good balance of gut flora, or what's right for you, is what's really, really important. And as I said, we're learning more and more. There's more and more research that it affects your mood. It affects your overall vitality. Your skin gets affected, and like I said, all those common problems like your tendency to gain weight, or be able to maintain a healthy body weight. Now, as far as what the main causes or how to keep your gut healthy, there's going to be a few on this list that you're going to say, well, of course. So last week we talked about immunity, and a lot of the things that link into good gut health, which obviously links to immunity, these same factors keep popping up. And I think it's one of those things where there's a few key things that are just so important to health on every level that they will keep recurring and keep coming up. So obviously one of the main factors that we want to talk about is sleep. So I'm going to do a whole separate talk on sleep, because it is just so many things, whether it be your correct hormonal balance, whether it be how you deal with stress, whether it be your immunity, all of this is linking back to sleep, and also obviously keeping a really great balance in your gut flora. So sleep, we'll deal that with a whole separate section, but again, so important. If people are struggling with gut health, you do have to address not just your, don't just look at your probiotics and don't just look at your diet. Sleep is just so critically important. And obviously linking to that is stress. So again, I need to do a whole section on stress, because just the impact on your hormones and the way that stress works is so critical. Now, I just want to say thank you everybody for joining. You didn't miss too much at the start, just talking about obviously gut health and what what the gut actually is. And now we're just kind of talking through some of the things that actually impact on it, which will then flow into how to improve that and how to make it better. So obviously sleep, stress. Now, this one to me is the killer. This is the high sugar, a diet high in sugar is going to impact your gut health. Now, I've been doing a lot of looking into all the modern diets. Like, 20 years ago, there was a whole bunch of different diets that were around and people used to follow. And now there's a whole bunch of different diets as well. So there's not a lot of commonality between a lot of these diets. But the one thing that is common to pretty much every diet that exists now is that sugar is bad. So, sugar... it doesn't really matter what different ratios and macros people are talking about when it comes to it. The sugar needs to be avoided. So basically, it's not only bad for things like obviously tooth decay, potential weight gain, unstable blood sugar, which could lead to diabetes, but also obviously inflammation. And, that's one of the signs of being unwell is when, your organs are inflamed. So if nothing else, I mean, I get kind of makes you paranoid because, sugar... we all love a bit of sugar. I have a sweet tooth myself, but it's definitely knowing the impact that it does have, and just knowing to limit it, and keep it in dosages which aren't going to send your body all crazy and do all kind of bad things to your insides. So then tagging into the back of sugar is processed foods. Now, that's the other commonality between most diets is that, more and more we agree that a food like, say like a white bread, which has no fibre added back in or no nutrients added back in, that is considered a processed food. Something where you're taking a food and in its natural state, and something like apple juice to me, like just as apple juice, clear apple juice, which has had literally everything, hi Monica, that has had everything stripped out of it, then that to me is also a processed food, because you wouldn't eat the amount of apples to say get a glass of apple juice, and there's really nothing else in it. It's kind of like the sugars only. So that's the same thing with your starches. If you stripped everything else out and you've just purely left the starch, whilst it has its application in different forms of nutrition and people who need high levels of carbohydrate quick for recovery, like high level athletes, for the majority of people, something which is made of food which has had everything stripped out of it is considered a processed food. Or things like reformed meat, I guess that luncheon meat, which is kind of like the worst part of the animal, is kind of collected and mushed together with some other ingredients to kind of make it form together and look like a meat. And those kind of things are normally very high in sodium. They're much lower in protein than what the actual meat itself has in it. So whilst, the fat may or may not be low fat, it's still, those kind of foods are the things that they're talking about when they say processed foods. So just keep that in mind, that also is going to have an impact on your gut health and your overall health, and doesn't really form any part of a healthy diet. So those are, that's from the dietary aspect, gut health. Antibiotics kind of goes without saying. If you have a course of antibiotics, obviously the gut flora are made up of bacteria. Now, antibiotics aren't really that selective, so they don't kind of say, oh, I'm going to kill all you bad ones and I'm going to keep all of you good ones healthy in my gut. So therefore, when you are on a course of antibiotics, you will be killing off both good and bad flora out of your gut. And it may be to kill an infection in your bloodstream or some other place, but it is going to impact what's on your gut. And just a little story to go along with that is my nephew, who actually turns 4 today, he was a baby who had a lot of trouble with digestion when he was first born. He couldn't keep food down, had a lot of gastric distress, and it took about 4 months. And finally, my brother took him to a naturopath, and it turned out that his mum had to take a course of antibiotics like literally the week before he was born, because of a complication that she had in her pregnancy, and that had knocked out all of his healthy gut flora in my nephew. So he was given probiotics, and from that point on, he was good. So it's those, the power of what antibiotics can do. So always keep that in mind, that when you are on a course of antibiotics, you do need to be more mindful of putting back the good bacteria, particularly after, like obviously whilst it's on you put it back in and it will get killed off. But afterwards, be really, really mindful to keep on and have a really good probiotic to replenish what's being killed. And also alcohol, I'm not going to say too much about that. It's, red wine may be medicinal, but alcohol itself doesn't have a really huge place in any healthy diet. This is another one, that artificial sweeteners. This is something where sucralose is probably one of the better artificial sweeteners, but it does still have that impact where it can, kill off or alter gut flora. And then aspartame actually increases a different bacteria which has been implicated in metabolic disorders. So what those can do is it can kind of kill off one type at the expense of another type, and then you can cause, whilst it might be okay when it's under control, but if you let one particular type of bacteria get overrun another type, again, that's altering the balance of your gut flora, and that can have other implications on other things. And obviously metabolic disorder is one of those very, very talked about ones in this day and age because of its very, very diet impact. So with artificial sweetener, as I said, I believe sucralose is kind of best of the bad bunch, but I have consciously, looked at reducing that in my own diet, and I'll talk about that in, improving gut health and how we can go about that. But that's one that maybe some people didn't know, that artificial sweetener. So sugar's really bad, and artificial sweetener's not that great. So you are starting to get down in your options for those sweet, tasty foods. Bad bacteria, of course, that one goes without saying as well. If you get too much of the wrong thing in your gut, it is going to impact you. We've all had food poisoning. We all know what that's like, and we all want to get that as right as possible. Now, that's not something that we normally go and, ingest as something that we want to do, but it happens, and when it does happen, we have to obviously fix that. So that's some of the main causes. I'm going to talk about sugar alcohols. Now, I have a pet hate of sugar alcohols. They have a really phenomenal use, I guess, in particularly the sports industry, because all those great protein bars, how they say low carb, and that's still kind of, how the old protein bars used to go hard like rock. Then they decided that putting all these sugar alcohols in was really good because you could get away from calling it a carb. And still keep some kind of texture in the bar, and they were sweet and it wasn't sugar. Now, they are not digested in the stomach, they are digested in the bowel, and that's why people get all of that diarrhea and gas and all that other really bad stuff that comes from those. Now, they have done some studies, and they say, well, okay, it doesn't kill off all of the flora, but a moderate amount of that can actually still alter the balance of that. So I think even if it doesn't alter the flora, if something leaves you feeling that bad, because I know that you can have some chronic nausea feeling from those type of ingredients, then they're probably a thing to stay away from. Now, the other side of the sugar alcohols is that they still have pretty much the same calorie count as carbs. So whilst they're metabolized differently, if you are trying to lose weight, you still need, whether you eat it as a carb or a sugar alcohol, you're still getting the same calories. So you might as well get it in a form that has a much more beneficial way of, helping your performance, helping your exercise, rather than something that maybe makes it really uncomfortable to train. So that's all I'm going to say on sugar alcohols, other than, pretty much as I've gotten older, I've had to really avoid them. And if I'm hungry and I have a choice of a protein bar with that in and probably nothing, I would probably choose nothing, or go for something that doesn't have protein if there's nothing else, because that's how bad I feel that these actually are for my gut health. So that's that. So that's all of the bad stuff. Now I want to talk about the good stuff, and some of it's fairly